Hi everybody, this is Jason Campbell and welcome to this month's episode for your Mindvalley Insiders. We're going to bring someone that you've definitely heard of before if you're a part of the Mindvalley ecosystem, and you might know him as a nutrition expert. And if you've participated in WildFit, you know that this man is a fountain of knowledge when it comes to this topic. But what you might not know is the man that I'm bringing to you today is also a master when it comes to building up businesses, and accidentally also became an expert when it comes to public speaking. The man has shared the stage with the likes of Tony Robbins and other big name speakers, and when he takes the stage, he always ends up being either the top or one of the top 3 speakers at the event that he speaks. What he's going to share with you today are ways for you to rethink what public speaking is, how it can actually benefit you in your business, in your career, or anything that you do in life. And you're going to think of the ways that public speaking you can approach it that you've never thought before. I love taking the stage, and I considered myself that I was pretty good on the stage, but once I started getting a glimpse of the ways that Eric teaches public speaking, made me realize that I was doing it all wrong. Now that I have these insights, I know that I can prepare better, deliver better, and understand some core fundamentals that will benefit me for the rest of my career, and I know will do the same for you. So it's my great honor and pleasure to bring Eric Edmeades for this Insiders episode. All right, everybody, welcome to this Insiders episode. Eric, thank you for joining me.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Now, I love how you teach public speaking because it's different than any other public speaking course that I've been to. And you have a style that's very much story emphasis, and we're going to get into that model of reality and those systems later. But before that, I did want to talk to you about how you accidentally became an expert, because I know there's an interesting story behind that.
Yeah, it starts with abject terror. It really does. I was so deeply afraid of public speaking that if you asked me to do a talk, let's say on Monday, you asked me to do a talk on Friday, and then I would say no because of the abject terror, and then you would accept my no, and now I'm not coming to speak on Friday. I would still feel sick all week until the event on Friday was over, because I was afraid somehow I might still end up having to go. I'm telling you, I was terrified of it. And so, a number of things changed for me. One being that I recognized 2 really important things. One is that I had a big mission that I wanted to achieve in the world, and I needed to get okay with communicating. And that didn't do it. That was just desire. And then something else came up, and that was in studying psychology and studying human nature, I found something really fascinating, and I ended up calling it the stage effect. And it's this bizarre attraction that gets created for somebody when they take the stage. When they walk onto a stage in front of an audience and they deliver value, then they create a level of credibility and authority that they could never create in a straight-off one-on-one environment. Or if they could create it one-on-one, it would take them way too long to do that for the 1 on 5,000 that they could do as a speaker. And I saw that and I thought, it's like an unfair advantage. Like one consultant who's good at public speaking and the consultant who isn't, that's not a fair competition. As a bit of an introvert, I discovered something really cool. I go to a networking event. I'm not really, I'm not shy. I'm an introvert. I'm not really naturally going out and introducing myself to all kinds of people. But now I get booked to speak, and I do a talk. I entertain, I engage, I inspire, maybe I share some cool distinctions, and now I don't need to meet anybody because they come and meet me. And that doesn't even talk about the impact on fees. The fee that you can charge as the consultant who doesn't take the stage compared to the fees you can charge as the consultant who does, it's massive. It's really massive. And I started asking why that was, and I observed some things. So here's one thing that I thought was really cool. The stage effect has a bit of a formula. The quality of your presentation times the size of the audience equals the amount of attraction you create. So if you do a really stellar presentation for 50 people, you'll create quite a lot of attraction. But if you do that same stellar presentation for 5,000 people, the attraction that each individual person feels is magnified by the number of people who are watching you.
Interesting.
And I'm always asking why. Always. Why does that happen? But it dawned on me, that, look, you and I, we remember before Netflix.
Yes, we do.
You and I also remember before internet. But what you and I don't remember is before TV. And I'll tell you that before TV, people sat around and listened to the radio. Like a family would literally sit around and listen to the radio. And before radio, they sat around and listened to stories around the fire. And what ends up coming clear at this point is that, and of course, through WildFit, I've gone off to go and live with Bushmen and actually observed what it's like to sit around that fire. I've been literally around that fire, that multi-100,000-year-old fire. I've been there and watched the storytelling happen. And what's really interesting is who's doing most of the talking? The most alpha members of the society, the chief and the best hunters. And around the women's fire, it's the women of the highest prestige in the community. And so what's happening is for hundreds of thousands, arguably even millions of years, we've been conditioned that the people that everybody's paying attention to are the ones we should learn from. And so the more people that are paying attention to you, the more you can learn from. And this translates to technology today. Haven't you had it happen where somebody sends you a video? Like somebody sends you 2 videos. One has 72 views, and the other one has 72 million views, and you can only watch one.
And my decision is clear.
The stage effect is clear. When you know that more people are paying attention to that video, or in the case of a speaker, where the more people that are paying attention to that speaker, the more traction they create. And this is unfair. I mean, it's unfair to the people who don't learn how to do it. And I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't even want to do it, but I wanted to be able to. And, I have lots of stories about how I ended up being forced to do it and how that caused me to be sick and how it caused stress. I mean, here's the cool part. If ever I wanted to lose, before I knew about WildFit and before I'd got all that stuff, if I ever wanted to lose weight, all I had to do was agree to do a talk somewhere. If I agreed to do the talk for the next 2 weeks, I would lose weight.
Oh my God.
I mean, that's how scared I was.
Yeah.
And so how I ended up kind of overcoming this was a little bit through sheer force of will, just forcing myself into uncomfortable situations, and then attending probably $100,000 worth of courses on public speaking and really studying it, and watching videos. And remember, I'm also old enough to remember before YouTube, which meant that when I wanted to watch videos, I had to go and see them at an archive somewhere, or I had to be lucky enough to catch them on TV. It was, or you could maybe go get a VCR and watch them on a video cassette, right? I can't even imagine how people take YouTube for granted today. And they take it for granted and sit there and watch cute kitten videos. And look, there's a place for cute kitten videos, but as a speaker, can you imagine what it would be worth to me to be able to log on to a device and watch all the greatest speeches in history and be able to break them down and analyze the tones of voice? And that's what I did. And of course, when YouTube came along, I jumped all over it. And so that was just for me.
Yeah.
Then, some of my friends were going, wow, you've gotten really good at this. Like my friend Carl, 20 some odd years ago, he's like, Eric, and I was still nervous of it totally, but I'd gotten okay at it. And he came up to me and he goes, Eric, you're so good at this. You should be sharing the stage with people like Tony Robbins. And I was like, okay, dude, seriously, have you been smoking something like that? I'm terrified of this. I do it in terror the entire time. I don't know what you're talking about. But then friends started saying something else. How can I do it? Right? Yeah. They started going, can you show me how to do it? I was like, yeah, I can. Having studied it, having broken down, I know what I'm doing. It's not like I was naturally born at it and I have no idea what the skill set is. I know 0 to 100. Like I know each stage of how to overcome the fear, how to construct a talk, how to make your talk so it's like you don't need notes, how to make it so it's time flexible. So if somebody suddenly says you had an hour and now you have half an hour, that it doesn't bother you. I know all that stuff. Yeah. So I started showing my friends. And then I started having too many friends wanted me to show them. And where it really heated up was I was teaching a business program. I have a business program that's kind of like a MBO program, like a master's in business ownership, right? Yeah, and I'm teaching them how to own a business, and all of a sudden one of the things I say to them is, look, marketing is really super important. And there's all these different kinds of marketing. There's Facebook advertising, back then we weren't even into that yet. We were talking about Google AdWords. Yeah. And then there's traditional media, magazines and newspapers, radio, television, there's direct mail, and then I said there's personal contact. And the thing is that nothing creates the kind of connection and lasting memory that personal contact does. And I explained to all the students in the class, I said, the problem with personal contact is that it's not very leverageable. I mean, how many personal meetings can you have in a day? And plus, many of the people that you want to have a personal meeting with are somewhere else. So then there's travel time. It's not a very leverageable thing unless you get good at public speaking. Because now you can have personal contact with 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. Yeah. And I said this to them, and then somebody raised their hand and go, yeah, but I'm terrified. And I go, yeah, I was too. And I told them a little bit about how I overcame my nerves a little bit. And they go, yeah, but how do you do it so you don't need notes? Because now they're suddenly noticing that I used to be terrified of it, and I've just spent the last 3 days on stage, 10, 12 hours a day, and I'm using no notes, and I'm comfortable, and they're engaged. And then they go, one of them goes, Eric, it occurs to me now that you say this, that you've held our attention for 3 straight days. And in high school, I didn't have barely a single teacher that could hold my attention for an hour. How do you do that? And so I told them a little bit. And I said, okay, guys, we have to stop. This is a business program. We got to go back to the syntax or I'm going to lose track of all time and we're going to be here till midnight. And I said, so no more questions on speaking. That's it. And so someone raised their hand. Yeah, what's your question? Well, about speaking. I just said no more questions about speaking. So I said, all right, this is the last one, everybody. Do we all agree it's the last one? And I answered that question. You have a question? Well, the thing is that I'm doing this talk next week, and they just wouldn't stop. And so I suddenly realized there was this huge hunger and thirst to be an open communicator. But people are constrained by 2 things. Their discomfort with it, which ranges everywhere from the abject terror that I felt to simply feeling yucky in your belly, just a little nervous. But any of that is not helpful. And then the second thing was not knowing how. I read one day that university students coming out of University of America were polled to ask them, what are some of the things that you really feel like university didn't give you that it should have for all the money you spent? And on the very top of the list was public speaking skills. They were coming out into the workforce and they were missing one of the most valuable skills on earth, and they just spent $50,000, $60,000 or more getting their education. Yeah. And so when these people kept asking the questions in the business program, the way I finally got them to stop is I said, guys, that's it. No more questions on public speaking. We're finished with that now. I'll make you a deal. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up an hour early for you, and we will do an hour purely on speaking. I'll take all of your questions, but I will only do that if we stop now. And that was it. Next question was about business. Next question was about business. Next morning, I got up, 8 o'clock, I went and did this talk on speaking. I'd never spoken on speaking, but it was really neat to kind of go through my journey of how I overcome the fear and all that kind of stuff, and then some of the strategies about how you use your voice and how you walk on the stage and this kind of thing. And then I said, okay, bonus session's finished. Now we're going back to the regular content. It's 9 o'clock. We're moving in. Questions about speaking. Only questions about speaking. It's a deep hunger for people. Yeah. But most people don't even know it's a deep hunger for them because their fear and apprehension is overriding in other words, there's a part of them inside, a little voice inside that says, I wish I could be more self-expressed. But that voice is being drowned out by the, hell no, it's bloody scary. Yeah. And so they don't even hear the little voice. And I had given them a little hope, and all of a sudden their hunger was coming out, and they wouldn't stop asking. And worst thing is, actually the best thing, is earlier we'd been talking about negotiation in the business course. And one of the things I'd said to them is when you're negotiating and you want to offer an option to somebody, you never offer the option that can end in a no. It's the old sales thing. You don't say, do you want the car? Do you want to buy the car? Yes or no. You go, great. Would you like the car in red or blue? And they're kind of stuck, right? I mean, I know it's silly psychology, but I'd been teaching them some of this stuff a little bit more strategically. And one of them raised their hand, and I said, this better not be a question about speaking. And they're like, well, no, it's more about business. Your business, in fact. Okay, go ahead. What would have to happen in order for you to come back here to Stockholm and teach us speaking? So I'm like, there's no to that. Like, they trapped me with my own strategy, right? And so, but there was a way to say no. I just gave them an impossible criteria list. I just like, well, it costs money to get a room. It costs money to fly me over here in business class. There's huge expenses. You'd have to have 20 people signed up with deposits. You'd have to go book a venue. You'd have to get me a sound engineer. I'm not producing the event. I don't do public speaking. It would be considered a private engagement, and you'd have to have all of that done by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Right? That's my way of saying no, yep. Right? 10 o'clock tomorrow morning shows up. They have the list of everybody, not 20, but 30. Yeah. They know where the venue is. I mean, they took care of all of it. And so now I go home and I realize I've done something terrible. You see, I'm pretty creative. And so I go on the road and I have all these business ideas and a new thing I could do and a new product I could launch. And my wife goes, my wife and I have this agreement that I'm not allowed to launch publicly any programs without running them past her first. It's our deal, because I keep doing that. And I suddenly realize, oh my God, I've committed to a new program without talking to her about it. I come home and I go, Elise, and she goes, what have you promised? And I told her the whole story. And she goes, wow, I think you'd be really good at that, but I'm a little concerned. And I said, why? And she goes, well, what you do with WildFit is quite literally magical for people. I mean, no diet program in the world has ever run with a 85 to 95% success rate. You're performing at a level that's unimaginable, and your business programs are the same. Like, there's nothing like them. And our brand we've worked so hard to build is based upon you delivering at that level. And she goes, you're a fabulous speaker. You might be among the best in the world, but that doesn't mean you know how to teach people how to do it. And she goes, I want to know what kind of results you're going to get. Cool wife, hey?
That is a good question.
Like, I want to know. And I said, well, look, it's a public speaking course. Here's my projection for you. Out of the 30 people, 3 to 5 of them will have life-altering transformations that are so significant that not only will their speaking be amazing, but their lives will completely change. I said, then another 20 of them will become phenomenally good presenters as a result of the program. And I said, maybe 3 or 4 will improve enough that they were happy they came. And she says, if you can pull those numbers, I approve. Those are good numbers. I mean, that's better than the normal, 3% of people who go to a seminar get anything, right? She's like, if you can pull that off. Well, I went back to Stockholm and it blew me away. I mean, I remember this one guy, he came into the program, Lars, sweet guy, accountant, kind of guy who walks into a room and nobody notices. Just not a lot of personality that was spilling out. He'd been constrained by parents in school to fit into his little box, and that was him. He did that program, and he has since won 3 comedy championships at Toastmasters, 3 of them. Comedy championships, not championships at a national level. And he is completely demonstrative of the entire class. I came back, my wife was there, and it was it wasn't 3 that had life-altering transformations and became phenomenal speakers. It was basically everybody. It was more like 3 people became better speakers, but maybe it wasn't totally transformational. And the rest of them, it was fully transformational. And what was really interesting is that now I've got this program I've created, and I've got this word of mouth of all these people going out into the world, and they're like, you got to do more. And it's now our most popular program by far.
So it's great. And the importance of actually learning why this program is developed and how it's become is because, like you said, a lot of people have that little voice, but they drown it out with a fear. And what we're going to do is shift towards what are these biggest rules that we can challenge, and so that you can start applying these concepts and have the stage effect work for you. You understand the importance now, and this program, it's good timing that we're doing this, because a lot of Mindvalley people have just went through this program. And what was interesting is the fact that when they finished the program, I didn't see them go in. I just knew them from how they were before at Mindvalley. And then I saw them after that journey that they did through this course, and I couldn't even recognize them. I had never seen anybody take a stage, and I looked at them and there was an aura around them that I had never seen before. And I actually interacted with them in a different way. I actually gave them so much more authority, because I had seen them on the stage to do that presentation. It was crazy. Now, being Mindvalley members here and being part of the Insiders program, what we've done in this interview is we're going to be breaking down the models, the systems, and some rules. You're going to get the best nuggets from the program so that you can apply it from the comfort of your own home, because it is an exclusive event. It's a limited event as well, but we want to give as much insights to the people so they can go and make some transformations by themselves so that they can see how the stage effects can work for them.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about doing this because, frankly, I take such a limited number of people into the live event, and I live where I love living, so I don't want to travel so much. I'm not going to start teaching this all over the world. So when we started doing some video training and that kind of stuff for people, so when you guys came and asked me to share the nuggets of the program with people right here, right now, I'm thrilled about that. And I'll tell you why. It's really simple. And this is really, really clear to me. I've been working with Mindvalley now for a little over a year. And, I've been to a number of events, and I've gotten to know many of the clients because thousands of them have gone through WildFit with us. And what I found is that you guys are amazing people. I mean, I really mean that. It's not a platitude. You guys are game changers and world changers. And I think we can agree our world needs some leadership and changing right now. And the challenge is that some of the game changers and world changers that I know out there are not comfortable getting their voice out. And even if they are comfortable with it, they don't really know strategically how to really create maximum influence. So for me to have the ability to come here and share this with you guys means that I get to leverage this in a much bigger way, because I know you're going to take it and do great things with it.
Beautiful. So the format I like to do this first part is I'll state a rule, and you can give me what the new model of reality people should be applying so that they can make a transformation.
Sure.
The first one is actually, a lot of people say, you know what, I can't publicly speak because I'm just too nervous.
This is really fascinating. So maybe there's two sides of this we can talk about. One is a little shift in thinking. It's a little shift in thinking. It works like this. Consider that if I told you that we have a guy off camera right now and he's really depressed, would you be able to tell me what his posture was like? Would you be able to tell me how his shoulders were hunched forward and how his head was hanging and how his face was slack and the way he was breathing? Of course you would, because our emotions show up in our physiology, right? And so what's really interesting is you can look at all emotions and kind of evaluate the emotions based on physiology. So if somebody's slumped over like that, they're sad. If they're really slumped over, if they're faint, they're depressed. If somebody's like got their chest out and they're crinkled up like this, they're probably angry or maybe determined. If somebody has their heart pounding in their chest and then maybe they've got sweaty palms and they're breathing quite quickly and their eyes are moving quickly, then we might know that they were what? Nervous or excited? Think about that. You see, the physiological cues for nervousness and excitement are exactly the same. They're precisely the same thing. So I want to offer you a formula. The formula works like this. Nervousness is simply excitement with a negative expectation. Think about it. Nervousness is really just excitement with a negative expectation. Somebody's excited and they have a negative outcome. That makes them nervous. And you can flip it the other way, because this is even more fun. If you want to know what excitement really is, it's just nervousness with a positive expectation, and we get excited. They're the same emotion with a different focus, with a different outcome, with a different movie playing in your head. That's a very big distinction, and that's something you can start to play with right now, because the next time somebody asks you to speak, just check in for a minute. Does your heart rate speed up? If you're, maybe you're not nervous of it, but many people are. Does your heart rate speed up? By the way, let's do it another way. Imagine that you're at an event and they simply hand you a microphone and go up on the stage right now. Most professional speakers, their heart would start racing, right? Their heart would start pounding, pounding, pounding. Their breath would come up, their shoulders, their eyes would open a little. They would start to feel feelings. And the question is, are they feeling nervousness or excitement? And the answer to that is simply in the projection they're placing on the immediate future. If they immediately see it going badly, then they're nervous. If they immediately see it going well, then they're going to feel excited. You see the difference? So the next time this happens to you, I want you to check in. If you start to feel a little nervousness, immediately ask yourself, how do I see this going? How do I see this going? And I bet you, if you're nervous, you see it going badly. And what you can begin to do is just stop, take a really nice, deep breath, like fill your lungs completely. Think about this. If you walk around a corner in Africa one day and there's a lion over here, how are you going to breathe? I mean, think really, truly. Are we going to walk around? Oh, look, a lion. Not going to happen, right? Well, the way you breathe affects the way you feel. And so the next time somebody goes, public speaking, your turn now, right? Well, in that moment, your heart might speed up, you might feel nervousness. So 2 things to do. Take a deep breath that will communicate to your body that everything is going to be okay. And then change the movie. Change the movie and you'll change everything.
So you've actually touched in, and I'm going to link this up. Usually I go through all the systems, all the models, and then we go to systems, but this is actually a really good chain. We have a rule, which is I'm too nervous to speak publicly. The new reality here is to understand that no, actually it's the same as excitement. You just need to have a positive outcome. The system we can use, there's actually 2. One is the breathing, so breathing deeply. And the other one, you can elaborate a bit more. You also talk about visualization before getting on the stage. And I know that's a big part of what you teach as well. Would you want to elaborate on it?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about visualization in 2 ways. We'll talk about visualization relative to what you're seeing in your head. You see, humans can't really differentiate between fantasy and reality at a subconscious level. Okay, that's a big sentence. Let me say it differently. Have you ever been to a movie that made you afraid? Right? Well, it's light bouncing off a screen. It's not real. It was shot on a movie set with special effects. It's not real, and yet our heart rate can pick up. And I remember watching a movie where this woman was drowning, and I found myself sitting in my chair trying to get my head above the water that didn't exist. And I thought, I must look like a total idiot. And I look around, and everybody else is doing it too, right? The fantasy goes straight in, and we accept it as reality. Well, same thing happens with the movies we play inside our head. Inside our head. And so if you are getting ready to do a presentation, you are going to visualize, even if you're somebody who thinks you don't visualize, because you're going to imagine the outcome. And if you allow your normal instincts to control the visualization, understand that your normal instincts evolve to keep you alive. And because they evolve to keep you alive, your instincts are designed to watch for danger. Right? So somebody goes, public speaking, your turn now, that's danger. And all of a sudden you go, oh, what could go wrong with this? That's a survival instinct. But if you can bring your consciousness, into the conversation, you can say, how do I want this to turn out? How do I really know it's going to turn out? And you start really seeing it work well. You see the audience smiling and laughing at some of your jokes. You see yourself maybe walking with purposeful determination on the stage. And when you start to see those images, when you start to hear the sounds of the laughter, when you start to feel the pride of good delivery, your nervousness will become excitement. But there's something else about visualization, and that is how you use your eyes. Because just like your breathing changes your level of stress, so do your eyes. Let's go back to our lion. I like lions. We're walking along, we see a lion track. Do we relax our eyes and gaze gently at the lion track, or do we stare at it intently? Boom! We look down at it. What do we want to know? We want to know what direction it's walking in, don't we? We want to know how fresh it is. We want to know how big it is. We want to know some stuff, so we're looking at it intently. Once we've determined that it's walking in this direction, what are we doing with our eyes? Focusing intently. You see, when we're in danger, we focus intently, and so a deep focus with your eyes generates a feeling of fear, which will communicate to nervousness. But if you can learn to relax your eyes and gaze at the audience and accept the whole audience into your vision, and even extend your vision past the audience and just accept an awareness of the whole room, what happens is something very different. Because you see, in nature, where we spent most of our evolution, if you were gazing, your environment was safe. You wouldn't be gazing at the horizon if there was a leopard over here. Right? You wouldn't be gazing at the horizon if a herd of elephants was walking by. You wouldn't be gazing at the horizon if there was a tribe coming over to have war with you. You'd be staring intently. And so what we do before we go on stage is we just soften our eyes and gaze back, relax. And that forces, it's like a hack, and it just forces the body to go, oh, everything's going to be okay. So it means that you can visualize inside your mind, and you can use your eyes outside to create the sense that everything's going to be okay. And then walking on stage is a pleasure.
So that one is an important one to talk about first, because that's a big roadblock for even people from trying. Now, I want to shift to the next rule that we're going to challenge, which is more in the intermediate to advanced level for presenters. I'm very guilty of this one too. When I prepare my talks, some people will script themselves and they think that's the best way. Others, like me, use the slides as visual cues to anchor my story. But you have a different method.
Yeah, my thinking on that is no and no.
Yeah.
Right? No and no. Now, there's a couple things to consider with this. You see, the first challenge is, we'll talk about slides in a minute. Let's talk about scripting. Okay, now, there is a time and a place for scripted speaking. One of the times and places is if you don't trust the presenter who's giving the talk, then you give them a script. If you're running a company where you're training people to go out and do lectures and you want them to follow a certain way, then you train them on the script and you get them to go to the script. You don't want them putting their creativity into your perfectly created formula. That absolutely works. But I'm hoping that if you're preparing a talk, that you trust yourself as the presenter. And so if you would like to appeal to one of the most important aspects of human psychology, then you need to be authentic on stage. And the only way to be authentic on stage is to be authentic. You can't fake authenticity. And what I mean by that is that if you are using a teleprompter or a script or even a script that you have memorized, it will take the shine off your authenticity and you will be acting. It will change things. And so what does that mean? Well, it means this. If you write a script, then what you're probably going to end up doing is trying to memorize that script. And because we speak differently than we write, your speech patterns will be altered by your attempt to memorize the script. What that means is you'll walk out on stage and you'll say something like this. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Edmeades, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about public speaking. Public speaking is an incredibly important skill that will help you. You see, it's pleasant, isn't it? But it's inauthentic. It's not real. You begin to get the idea that I've been doing this talk every day for the last 10 days, right? It's not authentic. And I want you to understand, your audience wants authenticity so much. They want it so much. It works like this. Would you rather have an authentic enemy or an inauthentic friend? Ask Julius Caesar this question, right? An inauthentic friend is dangerous. An authentic enemy is predictable. And I'm not suggesting you want to be anybody's enemy. I'm just suggesting to you that that is the power of authenticity. And so if you memorize your script and you try to speak it back, or you go from a teleprompter, or you use notes, it takes the authenticity away. Now there's another problem, and that has to do with linear memory. You know, what comes after Q? Quickly. I know you know. But for a lot of people, they're going to have to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, because we memorized the alphabet in one way. How about this? Can you do the alphabet backwards? I know some of you can, but let's be clear, most of us can't, because we learned it in a linear forward direction. In other words, we only remember B because of A, we only remember C because of B, and if a hypnotist came along and suddenly said to you, you will never remember the letter C for the rest of your life. C has gone from your existence. Please tell me the alphabet. You'd go A, B, and it's over, because without C there is no D. Well, think about that. If you write out your speech and you suddenly forget one section, one sentence, your speech is gone. So no, we don't do that.
All right, Eric, so I understand we don't use any notes. Now let's talk about the slides as well. So is slides a better way?
No, no, because here's the thing. Like, let's be really clear. First of all, slides should only be ever an accent to your talk. Like, let me give some clues. If your slides have words on them, they're probably wrong. Now, I mean that with all the care in the world, that every now and again, yes, there are slides you have to show because they're evidence. You know, it's a source of data or a graph or something like that that's imperative and it's nice visually. But if you have words on your slide to remind you what you're going to be saying, that's bad form. And I'll give you one reason. There's many, many reasons, but just right now, I want you to tell me, you answer this question.
Okay.
If I have slides that I simply use as an accent for my talk and I don't require them whatsoever, and you have slides that are imperative to your memory of your talk and the presentation, who is the slide projector going to break for?
Obviously me.
Yeah, that's just how it works, right?
It's the law of attraction, because I'm so dependent on it. If they would break, I would get nervous.
That's how it works.
Okay.
And so it's really imperative that our talk is a talk. It's ours. It's in here. We know how to deliver it. And then the slides are only ever an accent. They're only ever an accent. One of the drills we do, I don't think you've had a chance to do this yet, but we do this really cool drill with people when we're training them. And it's like we get them to do a talk and I control the slides. Slides they don't even know are there. And then they have to just bring the slides into their presentation, you know? If they suddenly, you know, this happened to me the first time I played the game. Is I launched off and I said, well, here's the story I'm going to be telling you, and then the slide popped up and it was a little baby, one of those little, you know, Ann Geddes shots with the baby in the hand, and I'm like, how do I integrate this baby into the story? And I go, well, here in the infancy of my presentation,
Oh my God.
that's how slides should be.
Yeah.
They should be evoking an emotion for you. They should not be a crutch for you to build your talk on. And there's so many reasons for it, but the most fundamental one, or the two most fundamental ones, one, what happens if you can't? What happens if it breaks? What happens if it gets corrupted? What happens if the slides break? But then the other one is that it's going to break authenticity. If you keep having to look up and read your slides or be prompted by your slides, it breaks the whole chain of things.
All right. Now this is the part. So I like speaking, and this was something that I had as a crutch. And when I heard that you were teaching how to not do this, I got very curious. So please tell us, what is a system that can make us apply a talk that you do not require the slides and I do not require a script?
Well, let's start with the Rolling Stones. What I mean is that let's say we go and we hire the Rolling Stones for Vishen's next birthday party. All right? I think it's a good idea.
It's a great idea.
So let's think about it. What do we need? Well, we got to get them a stage. We got the, make sure their instruments are there. We on lighting, sound, maybe a ramp for coming up on the stage. But after that, do they need to practice? No, they have no need to practice because they know their songs. There's a clue in this. What if we suddenly changed their time? What if we suddenly said, can you play an extra half hour? They would add more songs. Or they would take a song like Satisfaction and play the 7-minute version instead of the 5-minute version or the 12-minute version. They would flex the songs, they would add songs in. What if we went and said, can you cut half an hour out? Well, then they would cut this song and cut that song. There's a major clue in this. We no longer build a talk. We build a set. And the songs are your stories. The songs are the stories that you're going to use to get people to realize what you want them to realize. The songs are the stories. And here's the beauty. You know your stories. You don't need to practice them. Now, you might want to practice them to get them polished for the stage because the Stones did that. They practiced those songs again and again and again. And once they knew the song, they didn't need to practice it anymore. And once you have your story, you know it, you've told it a few times, you're not tied up by little details, the story flows from you beautifully, boom, you can put it into the set. Now think about that. You come along and you ask me, hey Eric, can you do a sudden talk? You know, like I had to do at A-Fest.
Yes.
Out of the blue, Vishen's like, Eric, could you quickly go do a talk? I'm like, yes, I can, quickly. How long do you want me? 20 minutes, okay. I have this point I want to make. I have this lesson I want to teach. These stories will do that well. Story number 1, 2, and 3. And I effectively create a mind map of my talk, which we call speech maps. And now I know where the stories are. And then if Vishen suddenly came along and said, could you do an extra 10 minutes? I have 2 choices. Tell the story slightly longer, or add another story in. I have a set. And what this means is, I never use notes when I'm on stage. To be fair, if I'm doing a training program where I'm on stage for 10 or 12 hours, I will have a syntax. That's mostly just to make sure I'm on schedule. It's not so much notes. But I've never used notes, and I never am crutching on my slides, not ever. And it also means that when somebody says to me, can you shorten or lengthen your talk? Can you go on right now? Could you do an extra bonus talk? It means yes, I can. Because I'm not creating presentations, I'm building sets.
Beautiful. And so an action step I'd love to give for the people that are listening, and this is something I got a chance to do during one of your shorter sessions that you did on a masterclass, is using Evernote is actually a powerful tool. And I love this example because I went ahead and did this straight away. And do correct me if I'm doing it wrong. Let's see if my memory's been good from your teachings. So what you do is you structure the stories with a headline that you instantly remember what the story is.
Yep.
And then you draft out the story in as much details as you can.
Be careful.
Okay.
Only bullet points.
Only bullet points.
Yeah, if you write the story as a script, if you write the story out the way you would put it in a book, then you will still try to memorize it.
Okay.
And you will try to remember the words when what you really need to do is remember the story. And that's a very distinctive difference in memory. Remembering the words is painfully difficult. Remembering the story is fundamentally easy. Forgetting the story is the hard part. You know, stuff happened to you. It's in there. You just need to get it out.
And you got the emotional anchor so you never really forget.
That's right.
Okay, so a good thing that I'm doing this test here. So you bullet point the story and you put as many kind of highlights in
Just
the story.
little details to trigger your memory. You know, I tell that funny story about Tony Robbins introducing me and getting the translation wrong and so on, right? It's funny, you know. And so what is that story? It's in my journal. It says Lost in Translation. Every story has a title. Then the bullet points, okay? Last minute invitation to speak at Business Mastery. Flying to Fiji, goals I set when I was on the plane. Tony wasn't going to introduce me. He changed his mind after he met me and decided he did want to introduce me. But then because it was a Chinese event, they only had a Chinese introduction. So he asked the translator to put it back into English. Then they mess up the translation and he gets some of the facts wrong. And instead of telling people I sold my business after 9 years, he tells everybody I started my business when I was 9 years old. Funny story. It's a great way to start any talk, especially if it's people that are familiar with Tony and fans of Tony, and it's Lost in Translation. There's the bullet points. In the top right-hand corner, what do we put? Do you remember?
Tags?
The top right-hand corner.
Top right-hand.
I'm thinking of the paper version. Once people have the paper version, they can go to Evernote. But top right-hand corner, you put how long the talk is, right? And the talk can have a flex. I can do that Lost in Translation story in as short as 2 minutes, or I can do a 20-minute or 25-minute version where there's many different teaching points. There were goals I set on the plane and how I set those goals and how they transpired. So there's all these other teaching points. I can tell the 20-minute version. So that means when I'm building a presentation, I can put that story in either a 2-minute spot or a 20-minute spot or anything in between. So put that in the top right corner and then onto the tags.
So at the bottom you have tags, which are the points, right?
Yeah.
Like all the points you can make.
That's right. So that story, it would be, I would tag it with things like Fiji, Tony Robbins, translation, business speaking, travel, F15, right? What's the F15? We'll get to that in a minute, but I might tag it this way and you'll understand in a moment. But what that now means is that Vishen comes and says, Eric, can you do a quick bonus talk? And if he gave me a topic, in that case he didn't, he said talk about whatever you want. But let's say he came along and said, Eric, I want you to talk about how somebody can build a business that doesn't take over their life. Okay, good. I take out my journal, I flip through, I only need to look at the bottom pages. Yes, we can talk about Evernote in a moment, but if we understand it on paper, it's easier to use it in Evernote. So I flick through and I just look for every story. Oh, there's a business story. Okay, there's one. There's one. I pick out 10 or 12 business stories. I look at how long they all take to tell. How long do I need to be on the stage? Half an hour. I take 6 of them. Done. Talk's built. Oh, can you cut it down to 15 minutes? No problem. Right? Full flexibility.
Wow. So to me, this was the most mind-blowing fact, because like I said, I was crushed to the slides. I didn't really have a good system to really time it. I kind of just played it as I was going through. But now with this methodology, I have so much more flexibility and predictability on exactly how I should have my talk structured. So this is a big takeaway. So you put in the bullet points, you have a title, you put the time range for each of these stories, and you give them the tags. And you can have as many stories as you can generate.
Everything that ever created emotion in your life is a story. Even if you can't imagine why you would tell it on stage, even if you can't imagine how it would help anybody, if you had an emotion, it's a story. It goes in the journal. It's basically, you know what? It's not a story journal, it's an emotions journal. I'm kidding. It's a story journal, but the point is that if you were having an emotion up or down, then it's a story and it goes in the journal. And what's really beautiful about that is that very often, by recording it in there, when somebody asks you to do a talk one day, you'll look through there and go, oh my God, now I know how that story can help. And you've got an inventory. This is inventory.
Beautiful. So now I want to go into another one that's technical for people that are taking this page already. And so we're going to go from Brule to model here, which is, first Brule is, when I'm a speaker, my client is the audience. You have a different perspective.
Yeah. I think this is a lot of fun. I often tell my audiences, if you feel like having a little fun on the internet, go over to LinkedIn, log into any of the forums or groups where professional speakers hang out, and write this question: who's the client, the producer or the audience? Don't answer it, just ask it. Then one person's immediately going to write in and go, oh, the audience. And then somebody else will go, no, it's the producer. And then it's going to be the audience. And you're going to see a fight take place that's worse than between Republicans and conservatives, or Republicans and Democrats, or it doesn't matter. Like, you're going to, it turns into, it's like blood feud. It's incredible. And I want to settle it once and for all. I really do. I want to be absolutely clear. It's a simple economic thing. The audience is the client if the audience bought the tickets from you. If it's your event and they bought the tickets from you, then the audience is the client. So when people come to my programs, they are my clients. But if you hire me, when I'm here working with you, when I've done events for Mindvalley is the client. I don't see how anybody could argue with that. It's just fundamental logic. And the reason that it's important to know is that when a speaker is trapped into this thing that the audience is there, it's generally about ego. Because they're like, well, my message is so important, it must get out to the entire audience. You know, it's like, and those are the speakers that very often will go over on time. And because what they're doing is they're going, well, the audience, I want to over-deliver to my client. I want to over-deliver to my client. The client is the audience, right? Well, no. The client is the producer, and if you over-deliver to the audience, then you mess everything up for the producer, because the next speaker's slot gets moved and the whole day ends up getting run late. You know, it just messes everything up. And there's a million other examples of that, but the bottom line is that when you're on the stage, the producer of the event is the client. They're the ones that brought you there. They're the ones that decide whether you get brought back. They're the ones that talk to other producers about you. So you deliver the maximum value you can to the audience through the lens of the producer being your client.
Yeah, and as a producer of events, to me that was an amazing insight. And I also started looking at the trends. Who are the speakers that keep coming back to AFES and events that we do? You are a clear example of one that we always bring back, which brings us into a system that we have regarding this, which is the fact that you have a two-word catchphrase that you were teaching everyone, which is, what is your number one thing you say to a producer when they make requests, if you want to be a speaker, if you want to get referrals, if you want to be known and build a platform? I think particularly important when they begin, this two-word sentence that you reply for any request is?
No problem.
No problem. Now there's a lot more to be said on that, because I've seen speakers you make slightest change, or that you don't do things that exactly like they want you to time a song at a particular moment, and then if you don't have it, their whole talk is ruined. You have a different approach.
Yeah, so let's be very clear before we talk about this, that there are things to be fussy about. As a speaker, there are things to be very controlled about. Like, there has to be water on the stage for me if I'm on stage for over an hour. There has to be. My health is important, and I won't say no problem if there's no water. You know, there are some fundamental things like that. But what I'm talking about is your relationship with a producer and how you behave with them. And maybe the best story about this, and it has to do with the whole speech mapping concept, is I got invited to go speak at a conference in Manchester, England. I got to the conference, and I was preparing for my talk, and the producer comes up to me, and I can see from the way she's walking up to me that there's something not right. You know, it's in her body. She's like, Eric, you know, I have a question. Is this a good question? Not one I'm going to like, is it? I mean, she's, you know, and she goes, there's been a mix-up with the whole schedule. I know you've come from a long way, but we need to cut your talk down from an hour to half an hour. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, wow, that's interesting, right? But before I tell you what I did, let's talk about what the average speaker would do. It's called a temper tantrum. I mean, really, truly, I'm talking about top-grade professional speakers I've seen on the circuit. I've traveled all this way, and I've done my slides are done like this, and I just have to have it my way, and da-da-da. And they freak out. And they figure that if they freak out loud enough, that the producer will say, okay, I'll go get somebody else to change. And the joke is that they're right a lot of times. A lot of times they can actually win the moment, but they lose the relationship, because they're not going to get booked again. They're just not. No matter how well they do, acting like that is not getting you booked again. And so my answer, she walked up and says, hey, can we cut you down by half an hour? I'm like, no problem. And she was stunned. I mean, the look on her face, she was like, what do you mean, no problem? I go, I meant no problem. That's what I mean by no problem. She said, no problem. No problem at all. I got to change a few slides. I've got time. I'm not on for a bit. No problem. So, okay. And she, no kidding, walked away with like suspicion that I wasn't, you know, this is some advanced manipulation I'm using, you know. No, it was no problem. But then what's funny is I'm sitting working on my slides, and I see her walk over, and she's talking to one of the other speakers, and he's sweating. There's something not right. I can just feel it. Like, I can see it, and I can feel his stress. I don't know what it's all about. I have to fix my slides. You know, I don't know him, so it's not like I can go interfere, but I'm aware of it. And then she comes back walking over. And I'm like, yeah. And she's got that same thing. Eric, we've got a little bit of a problem. I'm like, what is it? And she says, well, you see that speaker over there? I'm like, yeah. Well, his Mac just died. And his presentation is on a thumb drive and on his Mac, but he brought the thumb drive as a backup, but we only use Windows machines, and so we can't play his presentation. And he noticed that you're using a Mac, and he asked me if I could come and ask you if he could use your Mac. But I also know you're fixing your slides because I already changed your talk. And I go, no problem. She goes, have you fixed your slides already? No, but I don't need them. She's now really blown away. Now she's like starting to worry about the quality of my presentation. Like, she's starting to worry, right? And I just go, here you go. I hand the Mac over. They put it in. The guy looks over to me like I'm the second coming. Like, he's like, I have saved his life. Because why? Jason, he was dependent on his slides. And he was freaking out, right? So then I'm standing there getting ready to go on stage. He finishes his talk. He comes off. He gives me he's super happy. A big high five for me. I'm going up on stage. I start doing my presentation. No slides. No problem. So I'm on my stage doing my thing, telling a story, making a point, telling another story. I've got my set underway. I've revised my set to 30 minutes. Done. Then I get a 5-minute warning sign, which you should get when you have 5 minutes left, so that's fine. But then like 4 minutes later, I get another 5-minute warning sign. And here's where it's difficult, because sometimes if you're really good, you'll see the 5-minute warning sign and you'll just let them know with your eyes you've seen it and you'll move on. But a lot of times they've been working with speakers who don't really understand how to manage time warnings, so they kind of wait for speakers to go, I've got 5 minutes left, which is like a terrible habit. It's a terrible, terrible habit. So I was so slick, and I just saw it, made eye contact, moved on. And then because I was so smooth with the way I was finishing with my story, she's like, I don't see how he can wrap up in a minute. Maybe he didn't understand. I'm thinking that she's holding up the sign because they're reminding me that I only had 5 minutes left. But then I look at the face, and the face has this deeply stressed look on it. And it's like a question. And I realize they're going, can you do 5 more minutes? Oh, no problem, right? What do? I have the story I'm already in. There's a longer version of it. I stretch it out a little bit. No problem, I can do an extra 5 minutes. Then I get another 5-minute warning. Then I got a 15-minute warning. And then I got a 30-minute warning. Now, what's going on here is that one of the speakers had missed a flight or something and wasn't there. And this is what's really important. I really want your event producer. You tell me, you have a choice between roasting the speaker who's on the stage who doesn't know what's going on, and you said half an hour and you just need to leave them up there for an extra hour, right, when they prepped for half an hour. Would you rather roast the speaker on the stage or go to every other speaker that's sitting in the green room and ask them, would you guys go up and help because Eric's been up there and the other speaker, which would you do?
Well, I would find a way so the speaker can actually be informed of what's going on. I would never leave him out. I'd try to find someone else.
That's right, yeah. It would be way better to go. Well, she did. She went to all the other speakers and said, could you quickly go up? Could you quickly go up? And here are the answers. I already went up. This is another opportunity to give, another opportunity to create attraction. What do you mean you already went up? Well, I've already done my talk. Oh, you have one talk. Oh no, I'm not ready. I'm not due for another hour. I'm not ready. Like, she just kept getting, it's a problem, it's a problem, it's a problem. So she was forced to just keep giving me these signals. Now, here's what's really important. I was up there for an hour and a half in the end, from half an hour. The audience never knew the difference. That's what's key, because guess what? The producer's my client. I want it to seem seamless to them. The last thing I want is for the audience to know that the producer had a problem. So my job is to do it properly. 90 minutes goes by, I wrap, boom, applause, and nobody's giving me a louder applause than the producer. Woohoo! Like, I've saved their life. Now, how does this translate into business? This is why the producer is your client too. It's just so simple. A couple years later, I'm on tour. I'm in Europe. We noticed that the same producer is running a similar conference. My team reaches out to their team and says, hey, Eric might be available. You guys want to work it out? And they couldn't. The conflicts were just too tight. The way their conference was, I had bookings. It couldn't be done. Great. They said, thanks for thinking of us. We said, no problem. Another time. Put the phone down. Says, I just convened an emergency meeting of the whole committee, and we talked about the fact that you're available and that you can't make it because of your schedule, and we've just spoken to the venue. This is all in 15 minutes, and we found out that we can actually have the whole conference center for an extra day, and we're just going to add a whole extra day onto the conference just so you can come to Manchester. Now, that's an extreme case, but I think it makes the point that if you are easy to work with, if you deliver at the highest quality, if you make the producer's life easier, then they will want to keep rebooking you. And it is so much easier to keep clients than it is to go get new ones.
And I will add a caveat to this story, which is, as a producer, this no problem rule goes both ways as well. And so if any of you are producers, don't think that because a speaker is always going no problem that you can abuse them. You also have to hold your end of the stick. But for all the speakers out there, this is just a mindset that's so different than what I've seen in the industry. And you're one that lives and breathes this methodology and is shown in how you're able to always come back. We will give you the opportunities that you want. You get to command authority. And if you're on the speaker circuit as a paid speaker, you'll be able to command higher and higher fees as well.
Absolutely.
So really important here. Number one, the rule is the audience is my client. No, unless it's your own event. The producer is your client, and what you want to do is have this mentality of no problem so that you can always deliver more. And if you're using the methodologies of stories, you have so much more flexibility than if you had a script or you were following slides.
Absolutely the case.
So I want to go into the last part of this episode, which we've already covered so much content. Thank you so much once again. So I want to talk about a system specifically. And this system is called your F15. And I'd love for you to elaborate because I think it's really important for someone who's structuring their talk.
We have the F15 and we have the L15, and they're both very, very important. They maybe are the most important aspects of the presentation. The F15 stands for the first 15% of your presentation. It's also a little metaphor of the F-15 fighter plane. Why? Well, how much of the F-15's fuel is used just on liftoff? A huge amount. On a short flight, it might be half or even more used just to get into liftoff. And so I really believe, as a speaker, that it makes a great deal of sense to put a phenomenal amount of focus on the beginning of the presentation, making sure that that is clinical, that it works, that you're not leaving anything to chance. Because once you've done that, you can coast. You've got the rapport, the credibility, people are in, they're listening, and you don't have to work so hard after that. They like you. You've clinically produced yourself in F15. So what's included in an F15? First of all, practiced content. You don't make stuff up. You don't do random stuff. You know what you're doing. So remember I talked about in the story journal, a tag? You have certain stories that can be told very quickly, and they clinically and systematically produce the result you want. For example, laughter. Laughter is a great way to start any presentation. So if I go out and tell that whole story about how Tony told everybody I started my first business when I was 9 years old when he got the translation wrong, it always gets a laugh. It never fails. And so what am I going to do? Tag it as an F15. So now when I'm preparing a talk, I can go through and look at all of my F15 stories, and I know where they are, which also means that I can avoid what so many other speakers do, and that is just keep repeating the same old stuff. What happens with a lot of speakers, because the F15 is quite a tricky thing, is they'll find one story, and that kind of is a good start for them, and every time you see them speak, at every event you see them speak at, they'll just do the same thing. Now, that's fine for the new members of the audience, but for the people who are on their second or third or fourth time, maybe not so appropriate. So you tag it F15, boom, you've got your story. What else is in an F15? An acknowledgement of the audience. Now, I'm not really one to thank an audience, and maybe this might sound a little arrogant to you, but I'm kind of feeling like by the end of my talk, I'm hoping they're thanking me. I mean, I really mean that. I want to give them so much value that they're thanking me. So if I thank them, what I'm kind of doing is maybe saying to them, wow, thanks so much for being here. This might suck. Now, I am exaggerating a little bit, and it's not as bad as that, but what I'm more inclined to want to do is to acknowledge them. And an acknowledgement might be to say something like, I am really glad that you're here, and I am aware that you've invested both time and money to be here, and so I don't take that lightly, and I want you to know I'm going to deliver on the promise. I'm going to make this an investment worth having. Now, that does two things. It creates the acknowledgement of the audience, and the other thing it does that's really great in F15 is you create something called a big fat claim. I'm a big fan of telling the audience that you're going to rock the presentation. Let's just step back 1 minute, back to nervousness. You remember that? Here's a little clue for you about nervousness. Never, ever let the audience see you nervous. Not ever, not ever. The main reason for this is that if you let them see you nervous, then when they come up later and tell you how good your talk was, you won't believe them. You'll think it's sympathy, right? So consider that.
I love that you brought this up because it actually brings in the Brule, the model, and the system all together. So listen to this. There's a Brule out there, and you've touched on it, which is, oh, I should always start my talk by telling people that I'm nervous and I'm not a good public speaker. And every time I see that, it frustrates me, and I'm so happy that you address it. That's a Brule. You don't do that. The better way is to make the strong claim of how this is going to be absolutely worth their time. That's a better model. Respects the audience and makes them acknowledge that they're going to pay attention because you're about to deliver massive value. And one of the best ways and systems to use to get that across is to apply the F15, which is your first 15-minute of the presentation, or first 15% of your presentation, with including a laughter. And then your L15, we haven't touched on that yet. Tell me more about the L15.
The L15 is the landing. It's the last 15%. And it may be not even that much, and it might even be just the last 30 seconds. But what happens for a lot of speakers is they do this really great talk, and then suddenly they go, I have to come to the end here. And I don't really know how to end. And then they just end up going, well, thank you very much. You know, that kind of a thing. And that's fine, it's fine. But what's really nice, remember, we live in the day of short attention spans, and we live in the day of sound bites. And so when you can land on a really nice ending where it just wraps your whole talk up and gives them a good call to action or gives them a good reminder. Like, you know, we recently at the Speaking Academy we just ran, one of the clients did this phenomenal talk, and then he ended the whole talk and he said, you know, maybe my message for you today is don't work so hard on your children. Work hard on yourself.
I was there.
Nice ending, isn't it?
It's a great ending.
You notice that we did, 18 final presentations, and I think we had 18 fabulous landings.
Yes.
Because they'd learned to do the L-15. They'd learned how to lift off, and they'd learned how to land. And let's be clear, if you're learning to fly a plane, those are the two most important pieces. The rest of it's actually not so easy. I mean, let's be clear. Were you ever in a plane as a kid and they let you fly it a little?
No, I wasn't. They didn't do that.
That happened to me once. I was going on a fly-in fishing camp, and the pilot said, "Come on up and sit, and you can, do this thing." Now, let me be clear. Which stage of the flight are they going to let me control the plane? Takeoff, landing, or coasting?
Coasting.
Right. Well, we want to put our effort in at the liftoff and at the landing, and when we do that, it gives us a huge amount of confidence. Like when you know how you're going to start and you know how you're going to end, think of the confidence boost that gives you. Plus, consider again back to visualization. If you know how you're going to end and you've practiced it and you've tested it, you know it always gets you an applause, then you already know how it's going to end and you're going to be excited about it.
So I hope you guys noticed how we went through this presentation, and we didn't follow the regular format because you're a phenomenal speaker already, and you guys can feel this. Everything ties together. Every single thing we've covered today ties in together beautifully to give you a really great way to look at public speaking. So I want to do a recap for the benefit of the audience. For one, we talked about the stage effect. We want people to understand the importance of public speaking, and I hope by now you understand that it has massive effects on your career, in your personal life. Anytime you're going to be in any kind of interaction and there's a group, you will be able to command the attention. Second, we got rid of slides, we got rid of transcripts, and we're dealing directly with stories. And we have these story maps that we can build, and these consider a title, you have bullet points, you have the range of time you can use them, and then you have the tags. And this allows you to structure the talks in any way that you want to make it a beautiful presentation. We talked about who your true client is and the fact that it's the producer if it's not your own event. And so you always want to be in an attitude of no problem so that you can actually find yourself building more value for the producer, which will get you referrals, which will get you more presentation. And actually, I realized the first one we actually did talk about was this expectation of outcome has a huge effect on how you prepare yourself and how you present yourself as a speaker. Nervousness is just excitement with negative outcome. Yet we know that with visualization and proper breathing and preparing your L15 at the end are all massive confidence boosters to know that you should have a positive outcome on your talk. That means you will have excitement when you get on stage, which means you'll be able to get on that stage and rock it much more than ever before. And that was an amazing episode.
It's been fun.
It was a lot of fun. And I want to know, is there any other message you'd love to leave the audience with before we wrap this up?
Well, I think it's this, that, depending on where you are in your stage as a speaker, maybe you've never spoken before, maybe you're a professional speaker, this is the big one. Never, ever, ever stop learning. Never, ever stop improving. And I'll tell you, I've got maybe 10,000 hours on stage. I've spoken in 20 countries around the world. I still don't even really regard myself as a speaker. It's something I do for fun. I don't, it's incredible. But here's the feedback that I get from my producers that have been working for many years. They're like, Eric, every time we run this program, it's better than the last time. Every time we see that talk, it's better than it was the last time. And that's because there's never a moment that I'm not looking how to tighten it up, refine it, make it better, make it more impactful, make it funnier, whatever the case may be. I'm clinically working to improve. And the opposite of that, this is so interesting. I sent an email out to my whole database of business clients once, and I offered them a free video training, basically very similar to what we've done right here. Just a little bit more basic, but giving them some real steps. And I got emails back from them. I'm not kidding you. People saying, "Thanks anyway. I'm already a speaker." And then I thought to myself, perhaps this is why I've never heard of you. I'm sorry, I know that seems a little judgmental, but if you're gonna, just because you happen to speak a couple times a week for business doesn't mean that you're done with development. I'm not done development. Listen, I have followed, one weekend 2 years ago, I had to follow Bill Clinton on a Friday and Tony Robbins on a Saturday. I followed Michael Beckwith, John Gray. I've followed some of the most incredible people. It's not sharing the stage, it's being the person that they put on right after those people, because most people are afraid of that slot. And I'm not done. I'm not done developing. And so that's my message for you. Whatever stage you're at right now, find a way to practice. Find a way to practice. Record every talk you ever do. Record every talk you ever do. And you will absolutely refine your skills as a speaker.
Beautiful close. So thank you so much for watching, everyone. Another thing that I'd love to add, and you've heard Eric mention at the beginning that when he first started, he actually was quite nervous about public speaking. And the fact is, same story with me. It's almost like a trend that I've seen with a lot of the best speakers all started with not being that good on stage. So that makes me think one of two things. Number one, if you're not good on stage, then you actually might have an advantage. Or number two, which I think is most likely, is we all have a natural tendency to be a little nervous to be on stage. But if it's important enough for you, you'll start to do the steps that are necessary to improve, and it'll bring you to the place that you need to be. So with that, thank you so much for spending the time with us. I hope you got all the value you were looking for. And again, Eric, thank you for sharing.
You're very welcome.